then later on in the episode, you see Elgar just carrying like this dead octopus.
Alpha, where's Zordon? Is he okay? Welcome, one and all, to the very first Ranger Nation podcast, a bi-weekly, fingers crossed, Power Rangers podcast where we will have a Ranger Nation conversation, and you can get involved. Stick around till the end to find out how. Why do we need another Power Rangers podcast? We understand that question, we do hear you. There are a lot, and they're all successful in their own right. However, truthfully, we feel that we can provide a deep and somewhat diverse insight into the Ranger Nation fanbase at large. We're 6 friends from different backgrounds, different cultures, and different eras. And we are constantly finding ourselves having meaningful conversations over Discord about the finer details, the mighty morphing minutiae of this brand. So we started to record them, which is why we hope it resonates with all of you, the listeners. It sounds like friends talking, because that's what it is. We're not trying to educate anyone, we're not preaching, we're just talking. And now we're sharing it with the world. It won't always be all 6 of us. We know that sometimes it can be the more intimate, the better. But we had to have the whole gang here for the launch. And some topics obviously thrive on more input. So we figured that since this is our premiere episode of Ranger Nation podcast, that we would discuss our favourite premiere episodes of Power Rangers themselves, starting with our top 3. And so to give you an idea on who this us all is, let's do a quick roundtable of who we have with us today. Starting with myself, you know me as Mike or Toast. I run the socials for Power Ranger, the Twitter account without the vowels. My top 3 Power Ranger premieres would be Power Rangers in Space, Power Rangers Time Force, and Power Rangers Dino Thunder. They're not in any order, but there's a mixture of reasons for those 3. And now I'll pass it over to Bryce.
What's up, y'all? My name is Bryce. I'm nowhere near as renowned as some of the other people in this podcast, but I'm still very happy to be here. Hope you guys will enjoy hearing from me. In terms of like seasons that I think have the strongest premieres, actually a little mad at Mike for taking 2 of mine. So I was gonna say the In Space premiere and the Time Force premiere, and he almost got me with Dino Thunder. I almost said Dino Thunder too, but I think more about it, I gotta give it to RPM.
Yeah, you do. Oh, that's an interesting point already off the bat, that we have matching premiere choices.
That's true.
But we'll leave that for a moment and over to John.
Hi, my name is John. You may know me as Riff Ranger on Twitter and Ranger Board. I've been a fan since the start. I'm an elder millennial. I watched the show from day one, which is why one of my top 3 premieres is Day of the Dumpster, episode 1, season 1. I'd also go with Ninja Storm, Prelude to a Storm, and of course, above all else, RPM Road to Corinth.
And you know he's a bigger fan than us because he actually remembered the episode titles.
I did my homework. I prepared for this.
Hi, I'm Seth. I'm a Gen Z, a youth, you might say.
You could call him a teenager with attitude.
My top 3 premieres are RPM, Dino Thunder, and SPD.
All right. Hey, guys. I am Jason, also known as Tai Chi. You might find me on some of the forums running around the internet. I am not a fan of Rangers from the very beginning. I got in at the Turbo movie, but we will save that for a later time. As far as my 3 top premieres, I actually will go in order. Prelude to a Storm for Ninja Storm would be number 1. I'm going to go with Quasar Quest because I am a huge fan of Lost Galaxy, and there's some reasoning behind that particular choice. And then I'm going to probably be the oddball out here. I actually like a Zeo beginning.
I did too. I just don't like Zeo.
No, I don't like Zeo as a series itself. I really like that opening. I think it has a whole lot of stuff in it. It actually moves at a relatively good pace for the most part. So, and it was something different that the show hadn't ever had before. So,
Oh yeah, it absolutely was just a really good premiere and just a really good like introduction to new status quo, the new villains, even though they're never that intimidating for the rest of the season.
no, the rest of the season is just mediocre at best. I mean, at least it's better than O-Ranger. But as far as that goes,
You don't talk about O-Ranger.
yeah, we won't talk about O-Ranger.
We won't talk about O-Ranger because we have one last member to introduce. Jay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jay, better known as Toku Jay. You might know me as the guy who posts random redesigns that aren't AI generated on Instagram and Twitter.
Oh, the shade.
That wasn't meant to shade. Actually, some of the AI stuff looks kind of cool, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. My 3 favorite premieres are Beginnings, Part 1 and 2, Ninja Quest, Part 1, 2, 3, and 4, and Road to Corinth, which is just the 1 episode, I do believe. Are we allowed to count Ninja Quest because it's technically a premiere, but it's not a premiere of an entire thing? So
Technically, A Friend in Need would be the premiere.
Gross.
no,
Um,
Seth,
no,
no. Go away.
Ectophase, activate.
Because in that case, what will we count as Samurai's premiere?
Origins.
Yeah,
Team Unites has aired first. So.
I mean, is no one gonna pick Samurai's premiere just for the incredibly iconic line of "Yes, I am the Red Ranger" on horseback? Maybe the greatest line and delivery of anything I've ever seen in my life. It was.
You had better delivery there.
Oh, sorry. I may have ruined the bit, you know. With apologies to Alex Hartman.
I mean, it's not Brody, so there's that.
Oh my! We're talking about the best premieres, not the worst. Yeah, that's a liquor episode.
Step aside from this negativity. We'll save that for episode 2. So a few of you had Ninja Storm in there. That was almost in my top 3 because that's my favorite season. But I feel like the premiere just got nudged out from like nostalgic feelings for other things.
Yeah, I was about to say if Ninja Quest wasn't allowed, then yeah, Ninja Storm would have been my pick too.
Yeah, it was nearly. I nearly picked Ninja Storm, but I went with Down Thunder instead myself. But why is the ones who picked Ninja Storm? Why did you choose that as a favorite premiere?
I picked it because it just in every way it felt like a new era. Mm-hmm. Like it was totally different. It was shot different. It was a different location than we ever saw. It started with 3 Rangers, which we had never seen on this side of the Pacific. So it felt new and fresh in every way. It was funnier than we ever had before.
Well, and that's definitely it. It felt like Power Rangers, but it didn't feel like Power Rangers. It had comedy that was actually good. It had people that you could almost kind of relate to. And one thing that I really like about it is, you know, you start off with Shane, Tori, and Dustin, and you see them doing their things that they like to do, and you know that also calls to their ninja powers they have as well. But they totally suck at using the ninja powers, because they're just kind of the ones that show up late and everything like that. So there's a nice little stark contrast there of them not being perfect people. And, you know, it's inadvertently they're helping out a stranded person on the side of the road or whatever, a car broken down or whatever it was. It really sets up to that they stop to help them, which is a very Ranger quality type deal. But then you get them being late again, which the school had been destroyed and everything, and inadvertently they become Power Rangers. So, you know, it's just got a different feel to it. It felt new, it felt different, it still felt like Power Rangers, but not in that same sense. And it was self-aware too of certain things. You know, Dustin has that line about Power Rangers, and Corey's like, Power Rangers, you're joking, kind of thing. And so
Ninja Storm in general was just really self-aware.
Yeah.
Like, I think one of my favorite lines was Othor just lampshading how often the monsters explode.
Definitely.
Something along the lines of what do you have for me now, Zergain? A monster that blows itself up?
My favorite line in that whole premiere is again from Lothar. Probably most of my favorite lines from that entire season are from Lothar. But actually, I want to see if anyone can guess what my favorite line is in that episode.
Or is it the Power Rangers?
Nobody told me there would be Power Rangers.
Yes, that went just as well as I was hoping. Excellent. Yes. No, that was great. But that, and I can't remember. It might not be in the premiere, but in one of the early episodes when Lothar says to Zergain about cracking a smile, and he's like, "Sir, I don't have a mouth," and it's just the comic timing and the delivery of it is so good and on point. But it's like I feel like obviously there'd been, like Jason said, there'd been comedy before, and there'd been like, you know, semi-serious and probably. I mean, I don't know if there'd been that level of self-awareness and that kind of willingness to poke fun of itself up until that point. It just felt so fresh and new and different that, yeah, like I can't disagree. Like it probably is objectively better than some of the ones I picked for my top three. But yeah, it's hard to find fault.
I just love how Lothar is probably one of the funniest villains in the franchise, and yet he's also like a legitimate threat. I feel like that's something that Power Rangers.
Sure. Yeah.
That's something Power Rangers doesn't do often with their comedic villains. Actually, make them.
No.
Well, yeah, I mean, and even in the premiere, he had already destroyed the school and everything. Yet he wanted to literally, for lack of a better term, glass the entire area to make sure that there were no survivors. I mean, he said, you know, he wanted everything destroyed, and so, but yet he still has a little bit of that, you know, dry wittiness about him too. But, you know, going back to just the kind of the comedic timing, just real quick, was, you know, the part where they get their morphers from Cam and they're putting them on, and Sensei is, you know, announcing which ones they're going to be and all that kind of stuff. And then they stand there and do their pose, and then they just kind of go, "So how do these things work?" You know, and they're kind of like bumbling around.
Yes,
you know, it's just really good timing, and it leads back up to the morph portion of it where, you know, Cam's trying to tell them how to do it, and they're trying to figure it out, and then doesn't just like stand back and watch, and he does it.
Yes, yeah.
But on them for not having the Red Ranger be the first one to get it.
Yeah. I think Ninja Storm just did a lot of things right that, you know, makes it a pretty solid premiere.
So
I'll go as far to say as well that like Ninja Storm feels a lot more contemporary than a lot of, if not all, the recent seasons. Especially the ones that I've seen.
It still holds up.
it really does.
Yeah.
It's not dated at all.
No, and honestly, all this discussion is making me regret not putting it in my top three, because I agree with every comment made so far.
So I do have a reason why I didn't put it in there, because while I do like it and I love Ninja Storm as a whole, I think it really could have benefited from being a two-parter. So everything that was said was absolutely correct. I love how quickly it gives you an insight to all three characters. It sets up why they're not necessarily good at what they do yet, but they're still worthy of being Power Rangers. But I feel like it wasn't expanded on enough, and I feel like it could have been how we got in the second part was the world building for that season, because that's even something that doesn't really come up very well in the season proper. Like just the Ninja Academies in general, we don't really know a lot about them. We don't know like how Shane, Tori, and Dustin even found this academy, how long they've been there, what these academies are like all about, like how these just secret ninja schools came to be. Know about the Thunder Academy and the Wind Academy. I feel like we could have known a little bit more about them as academies before we just jumped into them being completely destroyed and having no survivors except for like this little ragtag group of students.
Maybe, but I mean, sometimes too much exposition to start with is bad. Not, you know, again, ironically, when you brought up Samurai and the whole fact that, again, this is all new to me until recently, but the fact that they didn't air the actual premiere until like months down the line, so people were just kind of thrown in the deep end. Like that's obviously the extreme end of it. It's too far the other way, where you just kind of dropped in the middle of a story. But I feel like too much exposition at the start. You kind of want that mystery. You kind of want that kind of bit of, you want to get to know the characters as humans first before you get to know them as like, secret undercover ninja warrior type things. And I feel like Ninja Storm later on down the line, again, we are kind of only talking about premieres, but I feel like it did the Lothar thing backstory. I forget the character's name now. Oh god. Yes, yeah, and you kind of get like the whole, the origin story of that, and so you see a lot more of the, the academy back then and all that kind of stuff. So it is kind of explained and explored.
It is, but not
in pieces.
I wouldn't say to a satisfying extent. Like we get a bit of like how it used to be in the Samurai's journey, but I would have really liked to have seen a bit more of like Shane, Tori, and Dustin's life as students before all of that was just kind of taken from them and they had to jump straight into being Power Rangers. It didn't have to be like a big thing. It just the most we get is that one scene of them just getting their butts kicked, and that's basically it. We still don't even know how they came across this academy or how anybody comes across it. Like how are people recruited into these ninja academies?
Well, and I also think too that we were so used to, this being I know Wild Force was considered a Disney season, but let's just say that there was a lot of Saban influence there.
Yeah, Ninja Storm was like the first real Disney season.
And with that, we were used to a lot of really 2-part premieres for quite a few of the seasons. And so, at least I was. So, yeah, I will agree that maybe Ninja Storm should have been a 2-parter. Because, imagine trying to fit everything that was in, let's say, Lost Galaxy's Quasar Quest, try to fit all that into one episode. There's just no way to do it. So, but I think...
Even in terms of the Disney seasons, isn't Ninja Storm the only one that was premiered wasn't a 2-parter?
Yeah, maybe so.
RPM wasn't.
RPM.
RPM, and again, I'll discuss in depth how I think RPM handled it well, but we'll get to that later.
Why don't we move on to, that was on quite a few lists as well, why don't we discuss what makes RPM's premiere so...
Because it's great. You might want to beep that. I just, I don't know.
It really is.
If Ninja Storm felt like the start of a new era, RPM felt like the start of a whole different show.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was just shockingly different in every way possible. It just completely different tone than we have ever seen before or seen since. It's just it felt cinematic. It felt big. It felt different.
And unlike with Ninja Storm's premiere, I actually do think they did a fantastic job just setting up the right amount of world building right from the get-go.
So one of the RPM strengths in the premiere is the fact that it both answers enough questions while asking more to then kind of get you automatically invested in who these characters are, because you basically see it's so well done how and again, I feel like for a lot of these, like RPM was like my top one and it will remain so, but every one of the premieres for the most part you kind of like, oh yeah, that was good for a Power Rangers premiere. Road to Corinth is good for a television show premiere in general. Exactly. As I will go as far to say. And it's set up, you kind of introduced to the characters as characters at the very start, basically the start of their story as, who they're going to become. And then the next time you see the 3 core team members, shall we say, they're already Rangers. We don't know how that happened. We don't know when that happened. We just know that has happened sometime in the, periphery of like the story of the episode. And again, it's so interesting and such a different tone in the sense that the main character of not only the series itself, but the premiere in general is who goes on to be the Black Ranger. He's not even a Ranger in the series, in the episode itself.
Oh, it takes several episodes.
It does. And
another part of it, that it was a whole different kind of storytelling. That it didn't need to be a 2-part premiere because the whole series kind of flowed as one cohesive thing.
Yes.
It was serial.
Yes.
I was invested. You wanted to keep watching.
It's, yeah, like I say, it was kind of like, it was presented with like the promise of answers. And obviously, we're stepping outside the boundaries of the premieres, but obviously the Ranger Blue, Ranger Red, Ranger Yellow episodes answered all of those questions of, how did they get to that point? And then from that point, how did we get to that point? But
in retrospect, it feels like a modern streaming binging show before that was even a thing.
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, like it's kind of, and it's so funny because obviously when you see things about like the modern series and we talk about like restrictions and they've got these things like the all the mandates that they're gonna meet and stuff, and obviously with RPM, like I'm pretty sure they had like a bit more leeway because Disney didn't care about anything at that point. But it still had those kind of issues where it's, you know, it's never going to be mainstream accepted because it gets to a point and then there's these rubber monsters and you've kind of got quite goofy voices and all that kind of stuff. And if you removed that side of it, you wouldn't think it was what is typically expected to be a Power Rangers episode. Like even down to if you removed the opening credits and you just had the intro, which is just the black screen with the very like, you know, serif text saying Power Rangers RPM, and it's so different and so stark in comparison to everything else.
It's something you would see now. Like I said, it feels modern. It feels like a new show.
I'd go as far to say, but with some tweaks to, like I say, mainly the villains and how they look and how they act and sound. And obviously some certain things that you'd like change or swap out, maybe the dialogue and stuff like that. It would function perfectly well as a brand new, fresh, modern reimagination of the entire franchise. You know, update the suits, update the kind of look of it and everything like that, higher budget for certain things. But I mean, for what I feel like what they did with the budget there as well, and you know, enough could be said about maybe down the line they kind of meant over budget, but for the premiere itself, it did the trick.
Like you said, I think you could take that episode exactly as it is, and all you change is the aesthetic of their suits, and you could show that as the new Jonathan Entwistle show.
If only we had someone who could design a good-looking modern Power Ranger suit.
If only.
No, that escapes me. I think everyone's to that.
Oh, it's funny.
Yeah, that was obviously a joke. I don't think that.
Yeah. If only Hasbro could get in touch with someone like that.
Another season that had very good designs, especially considering it was still a Power Rangers show at the end of the day, was SPD, which was also on a few people's lists.
Yes.
Go on, Seth. Speak to your people.
You mean the fellow youths?
Yes.
I think SPD had a wonderful premiere. I think it does a great job at setting up this alien world, or I guess Earth, but
Alien enough.
with aliens. Yeah, and I really love the comic book aesthetic that SPD has.
Yeah, I think that's something that kind of gets forgotten about. It's such a unique like visual language to the series itself.
SPD was really funny. Not like Ninja Storm funny, but
SPD is a fantastic season. It's just I felt the opening wasn't. I think what let down for me was, as this is probably going to be quite controversial for SPD fans, was the whole A Squad thing. I remember as a child when I first watched that, I was more interested in seeing the main characters, the B Squad, and I wasn't really fussed. I was like, okay, I don't care about this faceless A Squad. I want to see the B Squad. The
funny part is when we actually do learn more about A Squad, that actually kind of makes things worse.
I'm okay. I'm fine with everything about the A Squad within the premiere, except maybe for ironically the aesthetic. Because they don't look like when you said, well, obviously when you think of Power, especially back when in 2005. Yeah, Deca Rangers 2004. I'm getting confused. Yeah, so 2005. Obviously, you have a preconceived idea of what a Power Ranger suit is going to be, and it's, they weren't as, dated then. They were dated. Ironically, they were dated in 2005. They were dated in 1995, but they weren't as, we live in a post MCU world now, where like. Power Ranger suits just don't quite as they are, but like you kind of had an idea of how they should look, and when you see the A Squad, like they didn't look as cool or cooler than the B Squad and you'd kind of think that they should. You'd kind of think that they get the fancier, more elaborate suits, and they just kind of, you know, we've had suits that look like, you know, paintball teams since, you know, without getting into too much information on there, but
what I don't get though is like we can see that they bothered to make a full-on good-looking suit for Boom's dream sequence as the Orange Ranger. That lasted all of 60 seconds, if that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with these suits, they knew they were going to be reusing them again, and they were going to be quite prolific. So why did they go the really cheap route?
It's odd. Like me, the argument I guess could be made that because they were A Squad, they were the original like SPD like Ranger team that they developed, and a hint you could kind of take towards that is the fact that they've got like the reused space helmets. Like this is the kind of thing. Obviously, when I, you know, as people may know, I do redesigns, and it's the kind of stuff I think about when I'm doing it. So, you know, I guess for a little bit of a spoiler for when I get to doing the SPD ones, in my personal headcanon for that, like obviously when the Space Rangers were the first to reveal themselves to the public as being Power Rangers at the end of Countdown to Destruction. So presumably when all these human-based organizations are kind of developing this technology, they're doing it alongside them and the organizations that they're kind of involved in. So it would make sense that they'd say, okay, well, we're gonna take elements from this, which would explain why the helmets look like repurposed in space helmets. The suits themselves, I don't know, but maybe the fact that they look a bit almost like unfinished prototypes is because they were first, maybe. But then you'd also kind of think, well, then why would you then not give the new fancy suits to them and have B Squad take them? But either way, I feel like within story context of it, like having the A Squad and having like the team that you're following, the heroes being almost like, you know, the second best ones, like they're the underdogs, they're the ones that you want to root for. Like, I think that's like a really good concept. I think that's something that was like really brand new at the time, because up until then it was always, well, kind of brand new, I guess, because obviously the whole point of Ninja Storm, as we've discussed, was they were the underdogs. But it's kind of like, yeah, these are almost like, you know, in like the typical kind of like government organization type series like we'd had with Lightspeed Rescue and Time Force. These were kind of like, these weren't the top pick. These were like, this was like the Cast of Samurai, you know, but in the series itself, they were you know, they weren't the first pick. And so, and yeah, I just think that whole dynamic was new and interesting, and then that was really elaborated upon by having the characters of Jack and Z being outsiders, which again wasn't anything new to the franchise, having like outsiders come in and be part of a team, even being like Red Ranger. But I feel like SPD handled it the best. It's ironic given that a few months ago there was a bit of drama on Twitter about SPD and what it may have been, which, you know, may have backfired on some people. But I feel like in terms of representation of who can be a hero and what a hero is, and like the whole kind of core message of Power Rangers from the start, I feel like SPD handles that just as well, if not better than anything else in that regard, if that makes sense.
I think a common thread we're finding with all of our choices is that the best ones tend to be the ones that feel different, that they're doing something in a different way, a different comic book aesthetic we had never seen. The fact that we're dealing with the B Squad, these aren't the A-list Power Rangers. They're not the best. They all have severe character issues that they must overcome to be the A Squad team. It's just the best starts of the series are the ones that feel like they tried to do something interesting. It's not just cookie cutter.
To go off of that as well, like moving over to Time Force, the reason that's on my list is because I remember, this is purely nostalgic reasons it's on there. I remember as a child, not only did the coloured visors and the coloured gloves and boots make the season feel very futuristic and very modern at the same time, but I don't know what it is. It's something about the American footage. The suits look so crisp and so fresh, and so that first moment when we're seeing obviously the opening scenes of Alex in the red suit, it looked so stylish. And I remember that as a child thinking, like, this looks so clean.
Was there a lot more nighttime footage in
I think
the
there was a
Time
lot of
Force
nighttime
premiere?
ones, yeah.
Like that was always. I remember at the time that was anytime you'd see like ranger suits at night, it was always like a different and like very cool looking thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that makes sense. I can see that.
Yeah, but again, so it's just going off of what we were saying. It's because it was different. So visually, it looked different to me as a child, and I remember looking back and thinking it was such a good season opener. And then even when that scene where Frantic you think kills Alex, spoilers, he doesn't. that scene again is so different. We've never seen something like that in an opening of any season before. To complement that with this aesthetic design that's really sleek and, like I said, stylish and fresh.
Yeah.
There's just, in my mind, it always stands out as a very top tier premiere episode.
Much like how RPM kind of felt like we were just walking into a completely different show. Like when I was a kid, that was the same exact feeling I had while I was watching Time Force's premiere. Like just right off the bat, this did not feel like it didn't feel like a typical like Power Rangers episode that I was watching. I thought it was just a really cool concept to see like Power Rangers as public servants. That started off as something we kind of got a taste of in Lightspeed Rescue, and I felt like Time Force really expanded on that. Like they were a whole like law enforcement organization. They were police officers. Like it was awesome. It was just so different from the typical these people got picked at random and now they're forced to work together thing, which was what we got with Wes. But for the most part, no, these were people who were like actually chosen to do a job. This was a job to them. They weren't just random superheroes, and that's something I really
yeah. That's
I just
a good
always
point,
felt
yeah.
like that was sort of like a really unique angle to take with Power Rangers at the time.
It was because I guess up until the point of Lightspeed would have been the first one, but I guess Time Force was really the one that kind of actually did. Because I guess even with Lightspeed, it was kind of like there were still people that were selected. They were kind of picked out, weren't they, to kind of do
a rock climber, a SeaWorld trainer, and a stunt pilot.
Yeah, come here, stunt pilot man, you're needed.
Honestly, I'd argue Dana was unqualified too, when she really should have been the most qualified person there.
Yeah, but that's a good point because I guess up until that point, the like kind of like the status quo of the whole franchise was, these the destined heroes of fate or whatever like that. They were people that were picked out to do a job, whereas in Time Force, these are people that chose to do the job, and I think that is I don't think I'd ever really considered that before, but that's a very good point.
And don't forget, Dana became a full-blown doctor after being an EMT in a year, which is even faster than Tommy became a PhD. So, respect.
I'd imagine after everything she did, that was all honorary.
Well, speaking of doctors, Dino Thunder was on my list as well. And he was part of the reason, I'll be honest. Again, as a child, seeing the return of Tommy was amazing. But he's not the only reason why I think Dino Thunder is such a good premiere. In a similar vein to Ninja Storm, and it's why Ninja Storm would have been up there for me, the main trio of Connor, Ethan, and Kira, they are so realistically written as characters, especially for the time period. Again, I think Dino Thunder as a season's aged quite well as well.
Yes, that was if this was a top 5, then yeah, Dino Thunder would 100% be in it because the way.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't want to say more contemporary than Ninja Storm, but maybe
it feels that way to me.
Maybe
that's why I picked it. Yeah,
maybe it is. It's again, it's because when I think it feels more because having not watched a whole lot of the recent seasons, but I've seen at least the premieres of every season, like obviously leading up to this and stuff. Like when we get late to high school seasons, they just don't come even anywhere near close to like how well it was done in Dino Thunder. It kind of, it feels like just like almost like a parody of what a high school like TV show should be. And yeah, like it's
Dino Thunder is the most convincing teenagers we've ever had in this series.
That's how I feel about it, which is why I gave it the edge over Ninja Storm, because as much as I prefer Ninja Storm as a season, I feel like just that opening premiere, it really, like you said, the high school setting hits well, the teenager aspects hits well, the return of Tommy is just good as a fan of the show beforehand.
It's also Tommy at his absolute best as a character, I feel like.
Oh, I agree.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
100%.
When he's least
Much.
like himself.
He had to be written as a completely different character for him to finally be a well-written character.
But another reason that I actually really gravitate towards Day of the Dino as a good premiere is at the time when it aired over, I suppose in general, as it aired in general actually, that was when I just found out what Super Sentai was. So Abaranger was my first ever
Same.
acknowledgement
I had
of
no
Sentai.
idea Sentai existed until that episode.
No, not the episode, just even beforehand. So Ninja Storm was airing, and I was like, oh my god, I found online. I was like, oh my god, there's in Wonder in Japan, that's dinosaurs again. And then I saw the promos for Dino Thunder. I was like, oh, that's where they take it from. And so it was weird for the first time ever going into a season with knowledge, and I've seen these clips online before.
I must have discovered it at the same time as you, then. Yeah, that's
I had to
interesting.
have been like 4th or 5th grade during Dino Thunder, and my mind was completely blown when I saw that.
Yeah, for me, it's interestingly, it's kind of off topic, I guess, but it's fun because, again, I mean, maybe this is for another topic of like, how we all got into the franchise, so maybe we don't discuss this too much in depth right now. So actually, that is a really good idea for an episode, so I'm not going to discuss that in depth right now. I'm immediately stopping this anecdote, but yeah, I was going to say like how I first discovered like how Sentai existed. But yeah, we can discuss that some other time. That's
episode 3. So episode 2 is going to be what we don't like. Episode 3 is how we got into the show. Episode 4 will be how we got out of the show.
I do have a story for that.
I don't just feel that's what I was saying, Ninja Steel over and over.
Yeah, that's true.
I was gonna say about Day of the Dino. I think one of the good things about that premiere in terms of like kind of like fan servicey type stuff, because obviously the idea of bringing Tommy back is just 100% fan service completely.
Should have been Billy.
A lot of the later season, he's on a fish planet, he's busy doing fish stuff. He's with Day of the Dino, like Tommy's there, and like there's little subtle references, but like just even the title of a premiere being Day of the Dino, as in a nod to Day of the Dumpster, that's like such a kind of like true fans will get this kind of moment, but done well. As opposed to some of the more recent seasons where it's like, oh, look, this character's called Ernie, and the kids hang out at the Ernie place, and it's like, it's so uninspired and not really representative of what it's trying to kind of pay tribute to, and I feel like that's what a lot of stuff, even just in the premiere of Dino Thunder, but obviously throughout the series as well. I did it well, obviously ignoring the fact that Tommy is essentially playing a pretty different character. But I mean, I feel even at the time, I feel like as a kid when I was watching it, you kind of don't really feel like Tommy is a different character. I think you feel like Tommy is older than he actually is. Yeah. Like with looking back on it now, you think there's really not enough time between Turbo and Dino Thunder for Tommy to achieve what he's achieved and become who he's become.
Just even like the whole Force, even when we see Forever Red, there's no instance, no inkling of him wearing lab coats, doing paleontology or anything like that.
This is not the same Tommy that we saw in Forever Red.
You kind of, just like, obviously, if you kind of put that aside for a second, then you view it. I felt like as a kid, especially in the episode where he becomes the Black Ranger, and he's like, aren't you a little old for this, Tommy?
No, he's really not. He's like 28 years old.
Yeah, but like as a kid, it's like, yeah, he's old as. But then, like, obviously now you look at it and you're like, he's really not that old. There's probably actors in the show now who are older. Oh god, what? Oh my god, I forgot
Russell.
his name. The Russell. Yeah, big Russell.
Yeah, he's in his 30s.
Yeah, he's probably older now than JDF was at the time, which is just so funny to think. But
like, don't crack.
And only you can save us, so that's what. But yeah, it's like kind of at the time it didn't feel out of place that Tommy was in this role. It kind of, as is, it's kind of, you hate to play the whole it's a kid show card, but as a kid show, that kind of logical misstep didn't seem like a big deal, if that makes sense. Like at the time. So yeah, I think there's a lot of really good things to say about Dino Thunder and Day of the Dino in general.
I think it benefited too, both it and Alba Ranger, that it came at a time when it was like, yay, dinos again, instead of now it's like, dinos again. It's been 3 years since our last Dino team. Let's have another one.
Even I fully agree on that. I remember as a child being excited it was dinosaurs again.
Oh yeah, because it was the first time. It felt like, because again, especially if like Bryce, you weren't like as aware of Sentai, and I guess obviously there's gonna be, that's the kind of part that I always think is that I don't know how many casual fans that currently watch it there are now, but like casual fans, like say, who knew Mighty Morphin but might not know anything else, they see Power Rangers, they'll think dinosaurs. So it makes sense to a degree why they do it, but then I kind of feel like they don't really market it the way that they should. But that's a different story for a different time.
Episode 5.
But yeah, back then when Dino Thunder was like, oh wow, dinosaurs again. Oh wow, this is crazy. So. Yeah, it felt like it was made purely as like an MMPR tribute and not just kind of like taking advantage of the footage that we had available because it just so happened to be dinosaurs.
Speaking of MMPR, John, that was on yours. I mean, I know it was on yours as well, Jane, but yours was season 3. So
yeah, different. Yeah.
I mean, just obviously it was the first. It set the tone. It set the rules for everything. I think to this day, one of the smartest things the show has ever done is throwing in that line between Billy and Trini, where they establish that part of the powers you get as a Power Ranger is understanding your weapons and Zords. That closed every plot hole regarding that from then on. That was genius.
No, that's true. I never really thought of that.
Yeah, and I never thought of that because that's one of those things where like in modern series and in kind of like crossing over to like Sentai and Kamen Rider, I always enjoy when in the premieres the characters don't know what they're doing, kind of like what we were talking about with Ninja Storm before. And I enjoy when they kind of you see them learning it. Like Kamen Rider Gaim's a really good example of that, where the characters, they don't have like the handbook kind of built in, or no one's told them what to do, they just kind of have to learn on the job. Whereas yeah, that's a good point, because in an MMPR most people could say, oh, why do we know how to do all this stuff? And it's actually explained, there's a line in the show to, so it's interesting that even in the very first season, in the very first episode of the first season, there's probably more thought put into it than
it's just a few short words, but it closes a huge plot hole immediately.
I've never thought of that.
I didn't either.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things in David Dino where it's David Dumpster. Sorry, we've moved on from.
That was me slapping.
And I mean, I put it on my list. I mean, just from a purely nostalgic point of view, it was my childhood. I mean, it was important.
Yeah,
it was very formative for me at the time, and obviously still a part of my life now.
Yeah, for as much as
that's true.
For as fun as it is to like bag on classic Power Rangers, it really was influential for a lot of my life.
Whoa, back up a second. It's fun to bag on modern Power Rangers. Classic Power Rangers is great. That's what are you talking about, Bryce?
It's fun to get on both of them for different reasons. As fun as it is and as easy as it is to make fun of classic Power Rangers, I still can't ignore just how influential it has been on my life. Like, it was the gateway to all the other nerdy stuff that I'm into. It was the gateway towards me like discovering I want to pursue a career that involves me being creative, being a storyteller. It's how I went from wanting to be an author to wanting to be a screenwriter. Like, pretty much everything about my life, about my interests and my goals can be like attributed back to my love for Power Rangers, the classic Power Rangers.
One of the things I think David Dumpster does really well is, and again, people can kind of pick apart that the characters are paper thin or the kind of like one note, whatever, but like
Well, that's just the 90s in general, though, isn't it?
I mean, I kind of disagree, and you don't say a bad word about the 90s.
No, I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean it like that's a very. I feel like that's quite a typical thing of a lot of 90s sitcoms as well. Actually, really, it's just that the openings are very quick. They're not too deep in terms of explaining too much. It's just here's the setup, go.
I feel like Day of the Dumpster does just as good of a job as a lot of other seasons in introducing who these characters are and why they are different from each other. Because you're not going to get Billy confused with Jason, for example. You're not going to get Zach confused with Kimberly and so on. Like, everybody's got a very clearly pronounced character. And, you know, the cliched is whatever, you know, Billy's the geek. You know, Kimberly's the valley girl. Jason's like the, you know, karate jock guy. And so on. Like, Zach's a cool guy kind of thing. It's everything's got its, you can immediately see, oh, this character is this character is this. It's you know, it's kind of like that Saved by the Bell-esque thing, you know. It's very kind of straightforward and simple, but it does the job. It doesn't try to overcomplicate itself. And I think that in a lot of ways is probably why the success was there from the get-go. It was a simple but also very new and very fresh concept at the time.
As opposed to 20 years later when we have Emily and Mia and Emma and Gia.
Yeah.
It's funny because, again, I've just watched, on behalf of all you lovely folk, Power Rangers Samurai for the first time. And, you know, there's a lot, we'll get to that later.
That's episode 6.
I feel like a lot of it, the characters, it's kind of like not only are they paper thin, but the way you can kind of summarize the MMPR characters quite instantly from that first episode, you can't really do that about the characters in Samurai, other than like traits that don't necessarily represent them as people. It's like, she can't cook very well.
That's so relatable.
It's not a character trait. It's just like a running gag, essentially. It is funny how the show that was in 1993 still does things a lot better than a lot of seasons that have come afterwards.
But I think what happens there, though, is that Samurai really did try to kind of relive the hype and the whole, just relive a lot of, other than necessarily Megaforce as well, actually, but both of them, try to relive and trying to recapture that MMPR essence badly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, again, episode 7 is going to be all the many ways that they've missed the point on trying to recapture the magic of MMPR. I feel like that could be an entire, like, series in of itself, but, like, I think for as many flaws as MMPR has and as many issues people can find with it, maybe, there's so much that it did well. There's so much that it did that led to the success of the franchise in general. And the sad part is you can't even say there's so much MMPR did that led to later success, because basically MMPR was the success.
The only success.
And you know, we're gonna as we head into the 30th, I think we're heading into a 30th anniversary of MMPR. A lot of people don't really care that it's the 30th anniversary of Power Rangers in general. It's kind of hinging on that one thing.
It's very specifically MMPR. It's not the brand, it's that show. It's that cast. It's those suits.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for people that are within the bubble of fandom, because I still kind of feel like an outsider looking in a lot of ways when it comes to the fandom. But when you're in that bubble of, you know, and again, that's what I think is so cool about this podcast, is we've got such a diverse array of people that kind of came, like Jason, who came in during Turbo. What the f*** is that about, you know? Or like Seth being a young child who started like much later on. Like I think Samurai was his first one. Is that right?
No, my first technically would have been Mighty Morphin for VHS tapes.
We don't mean on a technicality, Seth.
But Samurai was what you started watching, like first season you were watching as it was airing.
No, that would have been Mystic Force.
God damn it, Seth. Ruined everything.
The whole analogy was just thrown out the window.
Sorry. I got into Power Rangers the year before with SPD reruns and VHS tapes. and then Mystic Force was the first one I watched as it
Why
aired.
did I always think that was Samurai? There was something connecting you to Samurai.
I thought it was.
Samurai was the first one where I was allowed to collect the toys.
Oh, okay, that's it.
And
Yeah.
I think that might be a big reason why I do have a connection to Samurai.
Right, okay. That's, yeah. Like, in my head, I just picture you wearing the Shinkenja suit.
Oh.
That's not true, but that's weird. I don't know why I said that. I'm sorry.
Magic Seth.
I mean, that's my favorite Sentai suit, so I'm very happy to.
Well, going back to MMPR, we also had Ninja Quest, which was lovingly added to our list of top threes by Jay.
Me, yes. So it's tricky because I guess obviously it's a season premiere. It's not really like a series premiere. I guess
I'd say it counts if
it's because again, we're not being introduced to the characters. We know them, and the fact that we do know them and we do know parts about them, kind of really helps. Because for me, I think I started watching it over here in the UK because we kind of got it, or like I know whatever channel I was watching it on, we would get it a bit later than the US. So it was maybe on like a year delay or so, give or take. I'm not too sure.
A year behind,
yeah, on the technicalities of it, but we were like that. And so I'd kind of got into it midway through season 2, I want to say. And by the time we got to like the start of season 3, I was like ready to go. I was like excited for it. And it was like such like a step up because in terms of stakes and drama and like stuff, like the scene where the Thunderzords get destroyed, like it probably like cemented in my brain as just pure nightmare fuel.
That was legitimately scarring to me as a 10-year-old.
Right? So, like, I must have been about, I don't know, like 4 or 5 maybe when I was watching it. And, like, the head just falls off.
It was so brutal.
The Tigerzord was like my first like Power Ranger toy, and I feel like it's one of the first like toys that I got just for me as a little kid. And to see that was just horrible, you know. And
It's still Tommy's best sword.
That's for another episode, Bryce. That's for episode 8. Come on.
And yeah, to go from that and then kind of like the world building of like Ninja and the different powers, like, you know, the source of the power coins and all that kind of stuff. And
Still makes no sense.
Let's call it
it
what
makes
is.
enough sense.
it's
It
world-
makes enough sense.
It's world retconning, not world building.
So right, the thing is, and it's tricky, it's with a franchise itself like Power Rangers, where it's just taken, you know, basically the whim of the Japanese show, you know, so they don't get to pick, they don't get to choose anything, except for the one time that America did get to pick and choose what season they wanted to do, and they never got to actually do it. So
They just gave us dinosaurs again.
I'll let Bryce lament on that one later. That's episode 9.
I will never not be upset at their decision to choose Ryu Soldier.
It's fine because you're gonna get like your wish is gonna get
Not how I
granted
want it to be.
later this
This
year.
is like the ultimate. This is the ultimate Muppet
No,
swap.
you will like it. You will like it, and you will love it, and you will say nothing but positive
I
things
will
about it.
Say enough about it because I liked Dino Fury well enough, but not enough to say that I'll love Cosmic Fury. I'll just be sitting there going, "This should be Q Ranger."
Oh, you wanted a Q Ranger adaptation? I'll give you a Q Ranger adaptation.
Don't do this to me.
The one good thing about Q Ranger is like the one part that they're not using, which is the suits.
Oh, they're just using
This is all for episode 9. Okay, right, come on.
So Ninja Quest.
Back to the good. Back to the good.
It's like, okay, so basically I was saying about like retconning and stuff. It kind of it's a necessary evil of the franchise because, you know, you'll have this kind of big backstory of this big origin story, but then a later season might have things that are going to contradict that just purely based on the Sentai that you're adapting. And so you kind of need that whole retconning thing to add things in. It's unfortunate, but you kind of
I'm
almost
not so
have
upset
to.
about the retconning so much as the fact that it doesn't make a lot of sense.
The retconning doesn't make sense. Yeah, I agree with that.
In what sense? Come on, let's debate this. Round table.
Magic Ninja Man made their powers, but he didn't make the ninja powers first. He just really liked dinos. He thought they were cool.
Yeah, he had these ninja powers in reserve, but made the dinosaur powers first. And then when he gives them the ninja powers, they're still dinosaurs. And like, I don't know. Just something about Ninja's whole entire thing just warranted further explanation that I'm actually surprised.
Okay, well, see, again, because my brain just works in these wonderfully imaginative ways. If you just go to my Instagram and check out my latest post, which has got my headcanon for Ninja's origin, you'll have a good time reading how I've tried to explain all of this stuff, so it makes sense.
Jamie shamelessly plugging himself as if the whole fandom doesn't already know who he is.
Do you like to plug things?
Damn high horse.
Wait, what?
No, we just messing with you. It's all love. It's all love.
I like Ninja Quest, you know? No, so it's kind of, I felt like it upped the stakes, and even in a way that I feel like Mutiny, obviously when I went back and saw Mutiny, it does, I mean, going back to watching like Green with Evil, that kind of does, there's like it feels like there's like a progressive step of, you know, the stakes raised, the stakes are higher, the stakes are up. And then I feel like Ninja Quest was like the highest point that they'd been raised to at that point. And I feel like, again, season 3 did a really, really good job of like building up to that as it went on. It really felt like it was building to something like monumental in the build up to Zeo. And obviously how Zeo executed that later on is kind of like for debate, I guess, in another episode 10. But
that's another episode.
But I feel like what like season 3 did, and what I feel like Ninja Quest did a really good job of setting up that kind of, not different in the way that like say Ninja Storm or SPD or RPM was, but it was different enough in terms of, okay, this is like almost like a new tone for Power Rangers. Like this is, you know, things have consequence, things can matter, this isn't going to be the same old like episodic thing. This is going to be more serialized. This is going to lead somewhere kind of thing. And I think Ninja Quest did a very good job of setting that up.
I do agree with that. It does go back to the point we made that the best ones seem to be the ones that feel different. And it didn't register so much as a kid because I wasn't aware of Sentai. But in retrospect, it finally felt like Power Rangers trying to tell their own stories, do their own thing, make their own footage, because that's what they needed. And it was something they hadn't really done before and haven't done much since.
It is interesting because obviously with a lot of the stuff that I've seen on Twitter about Cosmic Fury, and it almost feels like it's being presented in a way that I don't want to say disingenuous, because that sounds really like accusatory of me. But it feels like it's being presented as this like brand new first thing that the franchise has never done before, and it's basically almost identical to what season 3 did.
Exactly.
It's using Zord footage from a different season, but it's maintaining the original American footage, because I mean the vast majority of more footage in the season 3 is entirely original. I think almost everything, because even the Zord fight in Ninja Quest is new. The Thunder Zord fight,
they use some stock footage from Jew Ranger and Guy Ranger, but a lot of the footage of the Thunder Zords themselves being blown up was all original.
Again, it's kind of like looking back on it with like, you know, knowing what we know now about Sentai, it's such an interesting thing that it did things almost in reverse. Like the character of Rito Revolto, for example, was introduced later on in Kaku Ranger, and the Ninja Zords were actually like the second set of mech that the Kaku Rangers got, and the first episode where Rito loses in Power Rangers is actually the episode where he dies in Kaku Rangers. Spoilers! But it's just so, it felt more like they got into the swing of how they could handle the adaptation thing. They weren't necessarily thinking, oh, we need to follow the structure of how the Sentai is doing it. We need to, it was much more like fluid. It wasn't as rigid. It was, it just felt like they'd kind of hit the creative peak at the time, if that makes sense.
It's nowhere near as good as RPM, but it was the same kind of motivation as RPM, where this is a story we want to tell. Here's the footage we have. We need to make this footage work for our story instead of the other way around.
Yes, and that's something I think that with a lot of the more recent ones, they don't seem to have that grasp necessarily. It's kind of like they have the footage, and they think, okay, well, we need to have this footage, so how can the story fit? And sometimes they don't even bother to make the story fit with the footage. it's just so jarring that it doesn't really work. Whereas I think season 3 was one of those things where they really got the confidence to kind of say, well, we want to tell this story. Who cares what the Japanese story is, but we'll just make the footage work for us. And I think that's yes, I think it works really well. I very much enjoy Ninja Quest.
I enjoy it for what it is, which is not the premiere of season 3.
We're not talking about Friend in Need.
But which episode is this? It is episode 1.
Well, something that is episode 1, but also features returning characters, is Power Rangers in Space, which was on my list.
What a beautiful segue.
That's why he's your host.
That's exceptional.
Again, it kind of falls back a little bit onto nostalgia, but also when I've rewatched a few of the premieres in anticipation of this, because I also did a little bit of background research for today. There's moments to me, the one that's always stuck out, even since, again, watching it as a child, was just TJ holding the door open and saying, "We're coming with you." That moment, it's just like, you're like, yes, he's coming with you.
Was that the end of part 1?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, as they're all running out. And it's just like, so that in itself is just such an epic moment. But the whole thing starts with one of the best scenes, in my opinion, definitely in the Zordon era, but if not the all of Power Rangers. This is episode 10, top scenes. There you go. All the villains having that little feast on the moon, or wherever they were.
He's a spy.
Exactly, that bit. Honestly, I rewatched that scene so many times as a kid. It was brilliant. So we introduced this amazing, mysterious new character in a really nice suit. I'd love the in-space suits. They do work. For as simple as they are, they work very well. Yeah, so we had then the existing characters that we already had a connection with, making it into space. Poor old Alpha, toddling around the Astro Megaship, not knowing where to go. And then, just seeing them become, like, especially I think seeing TJ become a new colour, going from, like, obviously from red to blue. It's just little things like that. But just really.
But what was the explanation for that? Was it simple?
Oh my god!
Honestly, yeah. In all seriousness, though, I think it was simple. Ed was something they still considered to be like the main character, so they had the idea for Andros. So clearly, he had to be red, and TJ needed to be bumped down to blue. I wouldn't even say bumped down. I think TJ actually was better as blue than he was as red. Just saying something because he was an amazing red.
Well, he's made more appearances now as blue. Obviously, he came back as red in Forever Red, but since then, every time he's come back, he's been blue.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's not even the first time that a former Red Ranger has been
Moted to blue.
No.
Yeah. Agreed.
I mean, does it count as a demotion when Rocky was basically the only Red Ranger that wasn't the leader?
Rocky was the only Red Ranger to just not be a character.
You know that he just wanted to have fun, right?
That's pretty much it. Oh god, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Steve.
Yeah, so those
We love you, Steve, but still.
those were part of my reasons why it's such a powerful premiere, because it sets up, you've got a mystery around Andros, obviously, that you find out who he is a little bit at least in part 2 in that. You've just got some really good moments, and you've got that amazing opening scene, again, which I could sit and rewatch now, but probably shouldn't.
It's also nice that Andros is kind of a jerk. I mean, he's not real keen on having a team or really helping. He has one mission in mind, and everybody else that comes in, they've been a team, and they want to help, and they also want to find Zordon, but it's a nice dynamic where you had everybody working together just in the previous season, and now you've got somebody that's kind of going against the grain for him.
That's a good point too. I never really thought about that, but Andros would be the first real outsider character. Like, we were talking about characters who've been outsiders and stuff. Andros was the first one, and he was the first one that was a bit more aloof and not really warm to the team at the start. There was a bit of that, tension, I guess, at the start.
I've heard people say that Andros was the Red Ranger and the main character, but he wasn't really the leader of the team. That was still kind of TJ for the most part. And I'd honestly kind of agree with that because, Andros, his focus, even when he became more of a team player, was still less on the team itself and just more on, her own.
What happened to my sister? Somebody stole my sister.
It's nowhere near as worse as, where could my brother Aiden be? Oh my God.
That's episode 11.
Episode 11. Where could his brother Aiden be?
Wasn't In Space also on your list, Bryce?
Oh yeah, In Space was. I really liked the premiere, mostly just because I thought it was such an amazing follow-up to what is still one of the best finales in Power Rangers, which was Chasing the Space.
Episode 12, there we go.
Yeah, like it was just everything about just going from Turbo to In Space was just such a cool transition. It felt really natural, it all flowed really well. It got me pumped for what was to come, even though we still hadn't lost what we had before, except for Divatox. R.I.P. I'll miss her because she's one of my favorite villains. Actually, not even R.I.P. She didn't die, did she?
No, she did not. I was about to say, she's very much alive and well.
She was purified.
I keep forgetting she's one of the ones that lived. No, it's Elgar that.
But she was played by her other actress.
Yeah, no, it's Elgar that died.
Yeah. Was it?
Yeah,
Huh.
he's the real R.I.P. Elgar was amazing, but yeah, just
One of us thinks that.
everyone should think that.
Elgar was a thing that existed.
Elgar was great, and I will not hear any Elgar slander. I will not hear any slander towards Elgar, Divatox, Gindrax, or Toxica. Is that clear, young man?
Because I feel like
Oh no! When we get to Wild Force,
Ganging up on Bryce about Wild Forces episode 14.
I'm not looking forward to that because
yeah.
I know
that's
it's
going to
coming.
be our longest episode to date.
But
I thought Elgar's best performance was in Lost Galaxy. Oh wait, he wasn't in that. That's why. But that was also
one of the funniest things from Elgar was like in early episodes of Turbo, you'd have Divatox doing like her little villainous monologues, and there would just always be Elgar getting into some weird stuff in the background. Like at one point, it was just straight up fighting an octopus from inside their little submarine. And you're just like, what? And then later on in the episode, you see Elgar just carrying like this dead octopus, like he won the fight.
Dude, you just interrupted Mike's next great segue.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, he was just lining that one up.
Oh, well, you know what? It's okay because Elgar is more important.
Oh,
episode 15. All dedicated to Elgar. Apparently,
Everybody loves Elgar.
EJ Day, forget that. Elgar
Yep.
Day.
Right next to episode 18, why Steel is actually funny. Ooh, God, no. Never mind.
His butt was hard.
Guys, his butt was hard.
That's the natural comedy the series
Oh my
needs
God.
more of.
Oh no, Steel was. We'll never talk about Steel. Moving on. Yeah.
How do we segue from that? So speaking of steel, Terraventure was made up of a lot of steel.
Yeah, back to the good. We don't go to the dark times. We won't mention Beast Morphers. Let's get back to Lost Galaxy.
I am trying. You aren't letting me.
Oh, I can keep talking about other things.
No,
if you want to.
Elgar's done. Elgar's done.
But guys, he fought an octopus.
Speaking of fighting octopuses,
Scorpius has tentacles.
Hey, there we go.
yes, nailed it.
Who wants to speak about Lost Galaxy? I believe it was Jason.
So, I think that Lost Galaxy to me is. So it was actually my very first premiere episode. I ended up missing the Chase into Space segue from Turbo to Space. But anyway, to me, I don't know. Quasar Quest just kind of starts off, if it's one of those deals where it feels like Power Rangers. At the same time, you've wiped the slate clean. There's no continuation here. There's no, everything that was built up from Mighty Morphin in space, gone. But you have those nice little nods here and there. But, you start off with, you have kind of this majestic talk about these sabers and these stones and these warriors, and they're trying to pull these out. And then you kind of cut away, and now you get this beautiful shot of Terra Venture, and it just feels like a grand budget scaled show at that time where, and Chase into Space kind of had that, I mean, In Space was starting to kind of feel bigger budgeted towards the end there. But I think Lost Galaxy kind of set a little bit of a different bar. And the thing is now you have these nice little nods throughout there. You get the Professor, you get Bulk, you get a little bit of Skull. You get these nice nods to previous seasons without those being a crutch to those seasons. They're not being used as other bits. They're just kind of nice little things here and there.
I'd argue that they were used so much as not a crutch that it almost wasn't even worth bringing them.
No, Bulk and the Professor, yeah. I kind of agree with that. The thing is that I really like is that, you get the mega ship again and all that kind of stuff. So you get that, it's a museum, and you're introducing, to Damon then, and Kai needs to borrow the ship, and Alpha's there. And so, but anyway, you get this grand scale. You have not only Maya's planet getting attacked and turned to stone, but you have this space, venturing vessel that's going to find a new world and never going to see the Earth again, which you go back to, quite a bit. But then,
that's the In Space team that goes back to Earth way more than they should have.
Yeah,
Terra Venture never
I
made
think
it
you're
back.
right. They only went that one time whenever that kid was on board the ship. I think they went back to Earth at one point. But
No, they sent him back on his own. They just had this kid just travel into space on the shuttle, just completely by himself.
Yeah, they never actually go back to Earth. Yeah.
Okay.
Which
I feel like,
I just got a question. Do none of these people have families? This is just something you took all these civilians to? You're sending these children, these just regular people out on the space exploration to find an empty planet that you don't even know exists.
I assume, I mean, obviously when you think about that, that's kind of strange, but I assume most of the kids there had families there, they went as families, as units,
None of these people have extended families. Can we talk about how friggin' Mike was just gonna leave his brother behind?
He probably hated him. He was probably
how did Leo just
what the hell are you doing here, Leo? You little.
Just with how high-ranking Mike was, and just from how close he and Mike seemed to be, how did Leo not already have a way to get on there? Why did he need to stow away?
Episode 15, Families and Power.
Yeah, man, we could have multiple episodes on that.
Actually, wait. Yeah, I think about it. Did Leo have a ticket?
Oh.
No, because I remember the whole thing with the old lady that he saved. I couldn't remember.
No, he didn't have one, and he just stowed away.
Stowed away, got kicked out, and that was kind of that one thing too that was kind of neat. It was that dynamic where you have the Professor and Bulk, trying to get onto Terra Venture and stuff, but at the same time in the background you have Leo getting kicked out because he doesn't have a ticket. So your introduction to the Red Ranger is kind of this, he's trying to sneak aboard this ship, but the thing is the show has a grander scale, and you have your first actual what we consider death in Power Rangers with Mike, and passing that off to Leo, and where he was kind of this, and Leo kind of grows throughout the series, but he goes from being this person trying to stow away to getting stuck on a training mission on the moon to being the leader of the Power Rangers.
Which should have been Maya, but it should have been. Yeah, it could have been anyone other than Leo. Leo was another one where it just felt like he's the de facto leader because he's the one wearing red.
Did they? I was about to say I watched Lost Galaxy again fairly recently because Lost Galaxy is one of those ones that I remember really enjoying. First watched it way back when, but I didn't enjoy it quite as much recently. But I mean, it's still nostalgic and
I still
stuff.
think it's one of the best.
I don't know if they ever really acknowledged Leo as the leader, or did
There
they?
were a couple times where it felt like they never outright say it, but it was the overall kind of vibe you got there, kind of like how
I can't remember now, but it's
it was like how
I feel like it's one of those.
they didn't do it where you could tell there's a difference between the main character of the season and the team leader, like with RPM, how Scott was the leader,
Yeah.
but Dylan was the main character. No, in this case, it just felt like it was all just. Usually you can tell the difference, but with Lost Galaxy, it just kind of felt like Leo was. They're trying to have him be both of those things.
Lost Galaxy to me is one of those examples of when I think of obviously, and again, you have to take all of these things with grains of salt as being you're an adult watching a kid show. And when you do that, you kind of have to kind of almost view it with the lens of, oh, like, so it's good for what it is. But if it was like done for an older audience, you'd do more like this. And I think Lost Galaxy is a really good example of that.
Yeah.
Where, say, for example, with like Leo and Mike, you could have it so, Mike is this high-ranking official on this project and he's going away, and maybe they don't have parents, maybe they were orphaned, maybe they were like adopted kind of thing, so there's no real family ties there. And then it's kind of like Leo's trying to get on board to follow Mike kind of thing. And I don't know, but I feel like there's a lot that was never really touched. Like Maya, for example, like I think you referenced she should have been the leader. She's the one with the knowledge. She's the one who knows about the Quasar Saber. She's the one who kind of like, the de facto kind of like font of information for the team. There's a lot of stuff there where if you kind of look at it from that perspective, you kind of use your imagination to fill in those blanks. It really helps the season. If you just kind of go with what's presented at face value, maybe it's not as good. And maybe that's why as a kid I enjoyed it a lot more, because as a kid you're far more inclined to fill in those blanks yourself, if that makes sense.
Also, too, they set up Mike as being. He has a lot more leader. He has a lot more leader capabilities, and
Yes.
so when that sudden change happens, and I think it's something that's kind of touched upon whenever you get to that mid-season break episode of Destined for Greatness. I think that's where you get that nice contrast of like there wasn't anybody else that was supposed to be the Red Ranger but Leo. They kind of did set up Mike, and at first, I thought that was the way that they were going to go, and then all of a sudden he falls into a crevice and dies, and now his brother gets to be the Ranger.
I mean, even before that, the opening kind of already spoiled that Leo was going to be the Red Ranger.
Right.
Maybe Jason didn't see the opening, Bryce. Maybe he looked away.
No, I did see that. Yes.
One thing that a friend of mine did bring up at one point was how interesting it would be if when Mike came back, Leo gave him Red Quasar Saber back, and then Leo ended up being the one chosen by the Magna Defender to take over in that role.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff we could have done there. Like, I think it's kind of like how they didn't really touch on the idea that Rocky became the new Red Ranger and he was trying to live up to the previous one. They didn't touch on that at all. And then I feel, did Zeo have an episode where he kind of did?
Yes.
But it was almost too late for that by this point, because it was irrelevant. It was just they just so happened to have Jason back on the team. But I feel like that's something that the comics do really well now.
Oh my God.
The comics really kind of elaborate on that stuff.
The comics have done so good by Rocky. Holy shit! Like it's amazing how well the comics do with these characters who I previously just did not give the slightest of like cares about.
Rocky wasn't Zeo. Let's talk about Zeo.
Yeah.
I think Mike had a segue coming, and it's almost like the running gag of this episode is Mike starts a segue. Bryce has got more to say.
I am so sorry. We just keep.
No,
I believe, unless I've missed one, I believe this is the last premiere that was on any of our lists that we haven't spoke about. And that is one that is stronger than before. It's powered up for more.
Oh God!
There we go. Thank you. I was hoping someone would. Thank you.
I feel like the episode did it enough. That's the one takeaway I think I've got from that episode, is that it did that so many times. It was hilarious.
Can we just take a minute to just appreciate how epic Zeo's theme song is?
Oh, it's so good. So good.
I feel like Mike just did. He just quoted almost the entire song.
Zeo's premiere really solid. Did a great job of just building up off of everything all the craziness that just happened in the last episode. In fact, how big of a gap was there between last episode of Mighty Morphin and the first episode of Zeo?
Alien Rangers ended on February 17th, 1996.
Okay, no.
And Zeo began on April 20th. So it was only a couple months.
But they didn't they on one of the second airings, they did those weird shorts at the end of
Yes.
like the season 3 episodes?
Yeah, I
Yes, I
forgot
remember
about
those.
those.
The teasers.
Ones that didn't connect to Zeo at all.
Yeah, it's so strange. Like they're almost like a bit darker than before.
Oh, Zeo. It really was like a really dramatic shift in tone just for Zeo to end up being more the same, kinda.
It's almost like it kind of what like MMPR season 3 built up to be ends up kind of almost being like MMPR season 2, but with slightly more mature like episodic themes. But in just like season 2, it never really like felt like it was progressing anywhere to the point where it didn't even really have a proper finale.
No,
It felt like
it just ended out of nowhere.
Don't you love how as a Forever Red, the Zeo Rangers take credit for defeating the Machine Empire when that was all Zed and Rita?
didn't the whole, because Forever Red was written almost as a sequel to a fanfic.
Oh yeah, what was that thing called?
And didn't that
Scorpion
kind
Rain?
of yeah, it didn't. So didn't that kind of a lot of the stuff in Forever Red was kind of referencing events that happened in the fanfic? So I feel like maybe that's
How
where
did
that came from. Nothing that justifies
How
it.
did you get permission to do
You know.
that?
Do you think anybody cared?
Jason, wasn't Zeo on your list?
Yeah, it was on my list.
See ya.
I mean, we pretty much touched on everything that, you know, it was one of those that I think it was a little on the slow side in some parts where, you know, it was one of those that was a 2-part episode, but it was a little slow in some areas. But you had, you know, Rito and Goldar losing the memories, kind of wandering around, finding Bulk and Skull. Those parts I didn't really care about too much. But, you know, you have destruction of the command center and they find the Zeo crystal, but the Machine Empire is coming in during that time and obliterates the palace on the moon, and you know, Rita and Zed are like running to their RV or whatever it was. You know,
Get to the RV.
and, but I mean, then you have them finding the crystal, and you know, they come to
Yeah. That's the scene I had to.
they come to they fall down that pit, you know, which theoretically would never have happened if you're, you know, if this was real, because you falling down that type of shaft would in fact kill you.
Yeah.
But it was one of those where it was nothing like anything before. You were brought into kind of these airy undertunnels of the command center, and they're passing through trying to find, you know, where the voices are coming from, and they are welcomed into this new power chamber of sorts, and you know, everything's just different. Everything, the room's a lot bigger. You feel a grander scale with Zeo. Like, oh man, this is something that's going to be completely different. Unfortunately, the show wasn't. But you know, it's just one of those series where it introduces a lot of that new stuff that I totally don't know where my mind is going.
No, you're on the right track with the new stuff. It's
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like there's two polar opposite scenes in, was it Zeo Beginning?
Yeah,
Is that the name of the premiere? That like both were great and were also one of the worst examples of anything ever. So the great one, I'll go first, was when they go through and give everyone the powers. And again, like John was saying before about how well they explain things in like MMPRC and Day of a Dumpster. Like Zeo Beginning kind of goes through like, oh, you know, it's not just, oh, you got new power and, you know, there's a simple explanation for that. They kind of say, oh, because of, you know, the crystal and all that kind of stuff, some of you now have new colors and stuff like that, or anything like that. And it kind of, it's all explained. Like the reason that Billy isn't going to be one and he's going to kind of decide why he's going to stay behind in the command center. It's all kind of, it's explained within the episode. Nothing's kind of left behind. And then in that scene where they're given the powers and then they turn around and like the instrumental, I think, of the song's playing as Zordon's like, the Rangers you knew are gone forever, but like the suits are and stuff. And it just feels like a culmination and like a new beginning kind of thing. And it was done, I feel like, really well to kind of go with Jason's point. The flaw that I have with that episode, and it's something that I shall never forgive, it's the worst example of a cliffhanger that's ever been put to film, where I think Kat says like Alpha, what happened to Zordon? Is he okay? And then Alpha's like, oh, I'm so sorry, Rangers. I should have told you. And then it cuts away. And then it comes back and it's like, Alpha, where's Zordon? Is he okay? And he's like, don't what are you laughing? He's fine. And it's like, that's not what you said a second ago. You know? You just completely changed your tune there. So that was kind of...
How did Rito and Goldar not find the power chamber while they were like spending 10 whole episodes just under the command center? How big is this place for them to have not found that?
See, the only part I actually didn't really like about Zio's premiere was actually in Jay's favourite moment of it. All of that scene was really good. I just don't get why they chose the jankiest mannequins to put those suits on in the background. They couldn't even have anything that posed remotely good looking. They're just the most awkward positions, and it's always really distracting.
I don't even remember that. I think in my head I've kind of replaced it with the like the Iron Man Hall of Armor. You know, where it just kind of stood stationary and stuff. I bet it probably doesn't look that good.
No, they're really not that good.
I always used to wonder, like, because they had those costumes in like the display case. Just as a kid, I was seeing that, and I'm like, wait, are the powers gone or not? What happens if they put those on?
Well, they don't zip the costumes up, do they? They morph. And but I was like, when I was a kid, one of the confusing things for me when I was a kid was like I used to think that when they like transformed, like that was like their bodies, like the helmet to their heads. You know, and I don't know why. And so when I first saw them like take the helmet off, it like freaked me out. Like I thought, oh my god, am I about to see a skull?
I always just assumed like their clothes became the costumes, because every now and then they would morph and just wear something that they couldn't actually wear underneath. Yeah,
would not fit underneath.
Like when Shelby morphed in a whole like bridal gown.
Yes.
Well, as premieres go, I would say this has been quite a successful one on our part. We've future planned out the next 16 episodes.
In our series finale.
Yeah. And we've gone into quite a bit of detail about what we find quite good about our favourite premieres of Power Rangers. Now, before we wrap up, I just need to toss a quick thank you out there to you, the listener. Whoever you are, wherever you are, thank you for being part of Ranger Nation, but also thank you for listening to our first ever podcast.
Yeah, we want this to be like a podcast by the fans for the fans. I know that sounds like a cliche, but that's kind of the thing. We don't feel like we know more than you guys listening. We want to hear from you. We want to hear feedback from you. We want to talk to you too. Like if there's times we can get like, you know, members of a fandom involved and talk to us too, then that would be great. You know, that's kind of what we want to do. We want to open our doors, so to speak. That's kind of our mission statement.
Exactly that. We want to hear from the rest of Ranger Nation, as we're only a tiny, tiny fraction of it. So please tell us on Twitter and Instagram at Ranger Nation Pod, what are your favourite season premieres and why? And we'll read some of the replies in the next or future episode. But until then, in the wise words of the Hasbro era, stay tuned.